Compounders, Brad here. So Li Lu is one of my favorite value investors, one of my favorite investors. And he very rarely speaks in public. I think once a year, maybe he speaks to students at where he went to college at Columbia. So it's pretty unusual. This is only the second time he's spoken in China. Okay, back in November of 2019 to students at Peking University, and this Q&A was actually translated by this fellow who runs this blog. So, and it's so good, guys. There's so many gems of wisdom in this Q&A. So I'm probably going to take 2 or 3 videos to kind of break down these Q&A question and answers. And so this is going to be the first one. I'm going to try to get through the first 5. There's 12 different questions that Li Lu gets into. And the speech and the Q&A, I guess, are in his new book, Modernity, Value Investing, and China. Unfortunately, I can't find this book in English. So we'll start with this translated Q&A session. So let's get into it. The first question: I've been a sell-side analyst for more than 10 years now. What challenges do you think there are for me to become a value investor? Can you teach an old dog new tricks? So Li Lu says, switching from the sell to the buy side requires a change in mindset. I have a business owner's mindset because after I bought my first stock, I thought the company belonged to me. This is human nature. We think the things which belong to us are special. And it's similar on the sell side. If you're incentivized to pitch a stock, you're always going to be inclined to put lipstick on a pig, perhaps even to describe it as a unicorn. So, that's a problem. You're going to look for the saleable qualities of this investment opportunity. It's very different when you're trying to figure out if you should buy something as a value investor. Do you want to buy into this company? Do you want to be a part owner of this company? Obviously, you don't just want to look at the bright sides, right? You want to invert the story. You want to try to figure out what's wrong with this investment potentially. Why shouldn't you buy it? This really gets into the power of inverting the story, which I first learned about from Charlie Munger. The problem with many folks who start on the sell side, they can't stop selling, right? They're so good at it that they've fooled themselves. And Li Lu has seen this many times. Of course, he pulls out the quote from Richard Feynman, which is one of my favorites. You must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. So, this is why I see the most important thing is to stay objective and rational. So how do you do that? How do you stay objective and rational? He thinks the best thing would be to spend some time making investments on your own, right? Feel the difference in psychology between pitching investment ideas and actually owning these businesses. After a while, you really feel that these companies belong to you. Your frame of reference will begin to change dramatically. The way you gather information will change. Your antenna changes direction. And once it does, you realize that the information you gather is different as well. So that's his advice, how to switch from sell side to the buy side. Question 2, studying mistakes can help us understand success. Have you seen any determined young people fail? Let me just flip this on real quick again. Have you seen any determined young people fail in the end as value investors because they are unable to stick with it, even if they possess the temperament that you described earlier? So he described this temperament in his actual talk before the Q&A session. If so, why do you think they failed? I've seen many different people fail for many different reasons, the most important of which is passion. Now, this was very interesting to me. For someone to stick with something and get good at it, they must be interested and passionate. Say, for example, you have someone with a value investor's temperament, right? They have the right temperament for investing, but who is more passionate about other things. After studying value investing for a little while, they will turn their attention elsewhere, which is totally understandable and quite reasonable. The most important thing is not to think about in which pursuit you can earn more money. Because if you do that, you'll always be jumping around, because there will always be people who earn more money than you. If you measure your life based on how much money you can earn, you will always be miserable, right? Envy. Buffett talks about this, how it's the only, sin that's you don't have any fun with. You must therefore follow your passions. Okay, so that's interesting, and it's a shift I've been making recently from, just trying to find the best investments kind of on their own merits versus, what am I really interested in? That's why I've been putting out a little bit more content around sustainability, around, kind of transitioning to this low carbon economy. Very interested in companies that can help us with that transition. So that was an interesting point there. Question 3. How do I know if I really understand a company? Is there an objective benchmark to test my understanding? So this one really gets into detail. So Li Lu says, as value investors, we're in the business of forecasting. So determining whether you understand a company or not is simply a matter of assessing whether your forecasts were right or wrong. Sounds simple enough. However, the answer won't immediately reveal itself. You'll have to wait many years to get it. If you are intellectually honest, you will insist on knowing the answer, and so will naturally learn if you really understood or not. I hold my employees to a standard. If they really understand a company they're researching, then they must be able to say what will be the worst case for that company 10 years from now. The best case scenario will usually take care of itself, right? If you have the worst case scenario accounted for. So I really like that. What is the downside? How certain can you be that the downside is the actual downside, the worst case scenario? So it's a hard question, right? To know if you really understand the company. Why? Because people possess many cognitive biases. Everyone possesses cognitive biases. Charlie Munger listed 25 of these biases in Poor Charlie's Almanac, and there may be even more in reality. They exist because our minds are the product of natural selection, and their main function is for us to survive and procreate, right? Very basic kind of wiring. However, our living conditions today are the result of cultural evolution. We live in a civilized society, many of whose rules do not fit with biological evolution. As a result, many of our innate cognitive biases serve us poorly, making it hard for us to be objective and rational in our judgment. This is such a key point, guys. This is why we will encounter the problem raised in this question in our studies and research. You might think you understand something, but you don't understand your innate blind spots, nor the way they mislead you into a view which ultimately proves wrong. In other words, you didn't actually understand in the first place. So when you think you understand something, you must first understand what you don't know, because our knowledge is limited. The most important concept in the circle of competence is its boundary, right? It's a bounded circle, right? There's things that we know, and there's things that we don't know. And it's really important to know where that edge is. If you do not know where its boundaries lie and believe you know everything, then you certainly do not. You also need to understand that when you know something is right, you must also know when it will go wrong. So this is interesting. Munger has a standard, which I think is immensely useful. He says if you want to hold an opinion, then you must be able to refute it better than the smartest person you can find who disagrees with you, which is something, Ray Dalio talks about as well. If you can't, then you don't deserve to hold that view. This is a good standard which you can use to judge whether you really understand something. If you can do this, there is a chance that you understand it, that you actually understand it. But you must know when your understanding is wrong. In other words, you must know that your competence is bounded. If you don't know the limits of your competency, you can't possibly understand, as there is no way you understand everything. So, a little abstract, but this depends on intellectual honesty and requires continuous training. It is very hard to do immediately. So, this whole thing is about circle of competence, knowing what you know and what you don't know. Question 4, you just spoke about how to achieve real understanding. You also spoke earlier about how value investing is a learning process. Could you please talk a bit about which learning methods can help us compound our knowledge? Knowledge must fulfill several basic conditions to be considered useful. First, it must be able to be verified. It must be supported by logic and the facts you can see for yourself. Moreover, it should confer a high degree of explanatory power. At the same time, it should be helpful for making predictions. When we look at real life, it is scientific knowledge which best meets these standards. However, many of the phenomena we encounter in real life have no foundation in scientific theory because they relate to people. And in the case of people, we must think in terms of a distribution of probabilities. So important, guys. When you study mathematics, statistics is far more important than calculus, so you must study it well. This is because virtually all problems in the real world are statistical problems. Let's go back to the question then. How should we go about studying real-world problems? You still need to use scientific methods, but you must understand that all you will get are rough results. This is so counter to everything I learned in school, right? I studied engineering at UW-Madison, and there was always a right answer. This is so not the case when it comes to investing. Of course, it's better to be roughly right than precisely wrong, and yet scientific methods remain the most effective means with which to compound your knowledge. Another useful method is to let your passions be your guide. So again, bringing up the passion factor. When you become really interested in something, you can accumulate knowledge about it faster, more effectively, and better than anyone else. At the end of the day, you will be using this knowledge in a competitive environment. Your judgment must be better than someone else's. When you're really interested in something, you will keep pursuing it, even when others have given up. When others are satisfied, you will keep going. You will keep inquiring. This is what will give you an edge. So in the end, the only reliable approach I've seen is to accumulate your knowledge piece by piece by letting your passions be your guide, using a scientific approach and maintaining intellectual honesty. Okay, one more. Number 5. It seems there are 2 models for success in our circle. The first looks at the big picture and puts their trust in exceptional companies run by honest managers. They then step back completely and let management do the work for them. The second hopes to understand the company even better than management, with nothing too big or too small. What do you think of these 2 styles? These styles are actually both a part of acquiring knowledge. The quality of management is a big variable for companies. When a company is in its early stages or growing rapidly, its founder and senior managers have an enormous impact on value creation. This is especially true when we look over a long time horizon. And the longer the time horizon, the more important this becomes. However, many companies are driven more by the competitive dynamics of their industry, not any single person's determination. No matter how good someone is, they will not be able to produce exceptional results in a terrible environment. However, even a person of modest abilities can produce exceptional results in the right settings. For example, there are some exceptional Chinese state-owned enterprises whose senior managers have no experience doing business. That's shocking to me. And yet this in no way impacts their ability to produce good results. Each industry's conditions are different and must be analyzed on their own merits. However, the standard we use should be the same. Your knowledge should allow you to make reasonably accurate forecasts with a high degree of certainty about what conditions will be like many years into the future. No matter how you go about doing it or from what angle you look, you must cover each and every aspect. If you want to understand a company, you must understand its management and the basic drivers of its industry. This is one of the reasons why value investing is so hard. There are many, many things you must understand. This is therefore why we must have a margin of safety. We must have a margin of safety because our forecasts are limited, as is our knowledge. We can't know everything. But if you have a sufficient margin of safety and enough protection in the price, same thing, you can still make a lot of money even when you don't fully understand something. The margin of safety is therefore especially important. When the future isn't clear, you must choose those opportunities which are especially cheap. And when you're choosing amongst multiple opportunities, the bottom line is that they should be cheap. Margin of safety, super important. All right, guys, I'm losing my voice, so I'm going to end on number 5. But we're going to do 6 through 12, maybe in one more video, maybe 2 more videos. But guys, I hope you enjoy this. This is so good, so good. Distilling, decades of value investing wisdom into, a dozen questions. So stay tuned. Much more to come. All right, guys. See you in the next one.